This happened around 3 years ago now. I was driving home from work, which is a 1-hour commute. It was late, like 11 p.m. or so. I just pulled off and was driving down this long road. I had drove this plenty of times before, but not being lit and having dense trees all around, it was always eerie. Everything seemed normal until I noticed a car parked up ahead, right in the middle of the road. I slowed down, trying to figure out what was going on when suddenly, another car came roaring up from behind, blocking any chance of reversing or turning around. Panic surged through me as I realized I was trapped between these two cars. I didn't know what to do, but instinct told me I was in danger. I tried to drive around the parked car, but it was strategically placed, blocking the road completely. My heart pounded as I glanced in my rearview mirror, seeing figures emerging from the second car, shadows approaching in the darkness. I had to get out of there. I slammed my foot on the gas pedal, trying to force my way past the obstacle, but it was futile. My car screeched to a halt, trapped between the two vehicles. I was sweating, heart racing, and my mind racing for a way out. With no options left, I quickly unbuckled my seatbelt, flung open the car door, and bolted into the woods. The only thing I could think about was survival. Branches whipped my face, my breath ragged, and my heart felt like it would burst from my chest. Fear consumed me as I heard footsteps behind me, the sound echoing in the silent night. I had no idea where I was going, but I ran blindly, stumbling over roots and rocks, driven by sheer panic. I could hear voices behind me, getting closer, their tone sinister, sending chills down my spine. My adrenaline-fueled sprint eventually led me to a small clearing, where I saw a dim light in the distance. I pushed myself harder, the light becoming my only hope, my salvation. As I reached the source of the light, I found an old gas station, seemingly deserted. But the lights were on, and I hoped someone would be inside. I burst through the door, breathless, desperate for help. The attendant looked up from behind the counter, startled by my sudden entrance. I tried to explain what had happened, my words tumbling out in a panic rush. They could see the terror in my eyes and quickly called the police, assuring me I was safe now. But even in the safety of that gas station, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being hunted. The police arrived soon after, and we headed back to where I had been stranded. But when we reached the spot, there was nothing there, no cars, no signs of anyone. It was like they had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the darkness of the night. The police took my statement, but without evidence, there was little they could do. They suggested it might have been a prank or some misunderstanding. But I knew what I had felt, the sheer terror of being cornered, the chilling feeling of being pursued by unknown forces. I drove home that night, shaken to the core, constantly glancing in my rearview mirror, paranoid that they might return. I locked every door, double-checked every window, but sleep that night was impossible. The events replayed in my mind, haunting me, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that they were still out there, lurking in the shadows. Days turned into nights, and I became paranoid, jumping at the slightest noise, always watching, always waiting for something to happen. The experience had left an indelible mark, a constant fear that refused to fade away. I never found out who they were or why they had targeted me. But that night, that feeling of being hunted, of being in the crosshairs of something dark and unknown, it still chills me to this day. I was driving home late at night, and I saw this guy on the side of the road, thumbing for a ride. I usually don't pick up hitchhikers, but he looked so helpless, like he needed help. I felt this pang of sympathy and decided to stop. He seemed grateful, saying he needed a ride to the next town. Seemed harmless enough, so I let him in. He seemed nice, polite, and I thought I was doing a good deed. But as we drove, things started feeling weird. He was fidgety, kept glancing around, like he was nervous or hiding something. I brushed it off, trying not to judge too quickly. Then, he started asking strange questions, like personal stuff that made me uncomfortable. I tried to be polite, but I felt this knot of unease growing in my stomach. He mentioned taking a different route, saying it would be quicker. It felt off, but I didn't want to argue. That's when I noticed he was directing me further away from the main road, into some isolated area. I asked him about it, feeling this sense of alarm rising. He got defensive, saying he knew a shortcut. But it didn't seem right. Something felt off about the whole situation. I started feeling this creeping fear, like I was in danger. I wanted to pull over and ask him to get out, but I was scared of what he might do. Then, he suddenly changed, his demeanor turning cold and menacing. He said something that made my blood run cold, like he had something sinister planned. I panicked, tried to pull over and get him out, but he grabbed the wheel, steering the car away. I screamed, feeling this surge of terror. I was trapped, not knowing what to do. I begged him to let me go, to get out of my car. But he just laughed, this chilling, cruel laugh that made my skin crawl. I tried to fight him off, but he was too strong. He had this crazed look in his eyes, like he was enjoying the fear he was causing. I felt this overwhelming sense of peril, like I was in a nightmare. He kept saying these threatening things, making me fear for my life. I tried to reason with him, to appeal to his humanity. But he was relentless, making me drive deeper into the isolated area. I saw a chance and swerved the car, trying to create some distance between us. I jumped out and ran, not looking back, just desperate to get away. I heard him chasing me, his voice yelling threats. My heart was pounding, my legs burning as I ran through the darkness, not knowing where I was going, just needing to escape. I saw distant lights and ran towards them, praying for help. I reached a house, banging on the door, crying for someone to call the police. My mind was a whirlwind of fear and panic as I waited for help. I was terrified he'd find me, scared of what he might do if he did. The police arrived, and I felt this wave of relief. They caught him, but I was left shaken to my core. I couldn't believe what had just happened. It was a nightmare, a night of peril that I never thought I'd experience. I felt violated, unsafe, and haunted by the memory of that chilling encounter. I was driving home late one night, nothing unusual, just cruising along the empty roads. But then, I noticed this car behind me. It was unmarked, no police lights or anything. It was odd, but I didn't pay much attention at first. But then, this car stayed behind me, no matter where I turned. I thought it was strange, maybe they were just going in the same direction. I tried to shake it off, but it made me uneasy. I changed lanes, took different routes, but that car was still there, following me relentlessly. My heart started racing, this sense of unease creeping in. Why were they tailing me? I started feeling this fear building up, this dread of being followed. I tried to shake it off, but it felt like I was being watched, like I was in some kind of game. I turned down a dark, quiet street, hoping to lose them. But they kept following, their presence like a shadow behind me. I tried to rationalize it, maybe it was just a coincidence. But the longer it went on, the more I felt this growing sense of danger. I glanced in my rearview mirror, trying to catch a glimpse of the driver, but the windows were tinted. It was eerie, this car tailing me with no clear reason. I considered calling the police, but I didn't want to make a fuss over nothing. What if it was just a misunderstanding? But then, this car started getting closer, edging up behind me. I felt this chill run down my spine, this dread of what they might do. I picked up my speed, hoping to lose them, but they matched my pace, staying right behind me. It was like they were playing a game, this terrifying cat and mouse on the deserted roads. I started feeling this overwhelming fear, this sense of being hunted. I wanted to get away, to find somewhere safe, but I didn't know if I could. I tried to take random turns, hoping to confuse them, but they were relentless, staying right on my tail. I felt trapped, not knowing what to do next. I saw a gas station up ahead and made a sudden turn, hoping for help. I pulled in, hoping someone would be there, someone who could help. But the car followed, pulling in right behind me. I felt this surge of panic, this overwhelming sense of danger. I stayed in my car, not wanting to confront whoever was in that car behind me. I felt this suffocating fear, not knowing what they wanted, not knowing if I was in danger. I saw someone get out of the car, their silhouette ominous in the dim light. I locked my doors, heart pounding, trying to stay calm. They started walking towards my car, and I felt this overwhelming sense of dread. I didn't know if they were armed, if they meant me harm. I fumbled for my phone, ready to call for help, but my hands were shaking. I felt this sheer terror, this fear of the unknown. Suddenly, they stopped, turned around, and got back in their car. They drove away without saying a word. I was left there, shaking and terrified, not knowing what just happened. I didn't know who they were, what they wanted, or if I was safe. I waited for what felt like an eternity before I dared to drive again, constantly looking over my shoulder, paranoid that they might come back. I was driving late at night. The road stretched quiet and dark ahead of me. I was eating a bag of Cheetos and just about to change the radio station when I saw her. A woman standing on the side of the road, her figure barely visible in the dim glow of my headlights. She looked distressed, waving her arms as if asking for help. I slowed down, feeling a tug of concern. I pulled over, thinking she might need assistance. As I approached, she seemed panicked, her eyes wide and desperate. She pleaded for me to help her, saying her car had broken down and she needed to call for help. I felt a pang of sympathy, offering to call roadside assistance for her. But she was insistent, saying her phone had no signal. She begged me to follow her. She claimed she knew a place nearby where she could get help. I hesitated, something felt off, but she looked so distressed. I relented and followed her directions. We turned onto a desolate road, surrounded by thick woods. The trees cast eerie shadows in the moonlight, and I started to feel a creeping sense of unease. I wondered if this was a mistake. We arrived at an old, run-down building. My heart pounded in my chest. This place looked abandoned, desolate. The woman rushed inside, and I hesitated at the door, a chill running down my spine. As I stepped in, the door slammed shut behind me with a loud bang, echoing through the empty halls. Panic surged through me as I realized I was trapped. I called out to her, but there was no response. Darkness engulfed the place, and I fumbled for my phone, but it was dead. Fear consumed me. I didn't know where I was or what this woman intended. I navigated the maze-like halls, my footsteps echoing in the emptiness. Shadows danced around me, and every creak and groan made me jump. Then I heard her voice, but it wasn't the same desperation from before. It was cold, devoid of any emotion. She taunted me, calling my name from somewhere in the darkness. I stumbled through the corridors, my heart hammering against my chest. I found myself in a room. It was bare except for an old chair and flickering lights. And then I saw her. She was there, her eyes glinting in the dim light. But it wasn't distress in her gaze. It was something sinister, something chilling. My breath caught in my throat as I realized she had led me here deliberately. I tried to run, but the door was locked, trapping me with her. She circled me like a predator, her laughter sending shivers down my spine. I pleaded with her, asking what she wanted, but she just smiled, an unnerving grin that sent shudders through me. She whispered something about needing company, about never being alone again. Her words were chilling, and I felt a terror I had never known before. I backed away, my heart racing, searching for any means of escape. But she was too close, her presence suffocating. I made a dash for another door, hoping for a way out. But it led to another corridor, another dead end. Panic surged, and I knew I was trapped in this nightmare. I could feel her behind me, her breath cold on my neck. In a last desperate attempt, I tried to break a window, but it wouldn't budge. She was right there, her grip like ice on my shoulder. I turned to face her, her face twisted into a malevolent smile. And then everything went dark. When I woke up, I was back in my car, on the side of the road where I first saw her. It was morning now, the sun rising on the horizon. My heart raced as I tried to comprehend what had happened. It felt like a terrible dream, but the fear lingered, too real to dismiss. I drove away as fast as I could, shaken to my core, wondering if it was all just a nightmare or something far more sinister. Want to hear something really messed up and chilling? Well, I was driving down a quiet road, just me and the sound of 80s music on the radio. Then, my car started making weird noises, and the engine cut out. I pulled over, feeling stuck and frustrated. I didn't know what to do. I'm no mechanic. I sat there, hoping someone might come along to help. After a while, a guy appeared, asking if I needed help. He seemed friendly, offering to take a look at the car. I thought it was my lucky day. I needed help, and here was someone willing to lend a hand. He popped the hood and tinkered around, saying he could fix it. He suggested we go to his place nearby to grab some tools. I felt a bit unsure, but he seemed nice enough, and I didn't want to be stuck there forever. So, I agreed, hoping it'd get my car going again. We drove in his car, and I felt a bit weird, not knowing this guy or where we were going. We arrived at this rundown house, and my gut told me something was off. But I figured, hey, he's just getting tools, right? I waited in the car, feeling more uneasy by the minute. Then, time stretched out, and he didn't come back. I started to panic, wondering what was taking so long. I got out to check, and the front door was open. I called out, asking if everything was okay, but there was no answer. The house felt eerie, quiet. I hesitated, not sure what to do. Then, I heard a sound from inside, like someone moving around. I went in, calling out again, hoping it was him. But it wasn't. It was dark, and I couldn't see much. The guy was there, but he was acting strange, saying weird things that didn't make sense. He looked at me in a way that made my skin crawl. I started backing away, feeling this growing fear inside me. I wanted to leave, to get out of there, but he blocked the door. My heart pounded. I didn't know what he was capable of. I tried to stay calm, pretending like I wasn't scared. He started talking about how he wanted company, how he liked having people around. It sent a chill down my spine, and I knew I had to get away. I made a run for it, trying to get past him, but he grabbed me, his grip tight and strong. I struggled, fought against him, but he was too strong. Fear gripped me as I realized I was in trouble. I begged him to let me go, to leave me alone, but he just laughed, a laugh that made my blood run cold. I managed to break free and bolted out the door. I ran as fast as I could, not looking back, not stopping until I reached a main road. I flagged down a passing car, my heart pounding in my chest. I told them what happened, and they called the police. The cops arrived, and I explained everything, feeling shaky and terrified. They went to check out that house, but the guy was gone, like he vanished into thin air. They couldn't find him, and I didn't know what to think. I went back home, but I couldn't shake off that fear, that feeling of being trapped. Every sound made me jump, every shadow felt threatening. I kept thinking about what could have happened, what might have happened if I didn't manage to get away. This one night a few years back, I was driving home after a long day at work, and I saw flashing lights behind me. I pulled over, thinking it was a routine traffic stop. But there was something odd about the car that stopped me. No official markings, just plain. Two guys got out, dressed like cops but without any badges or official uniforms. I felt a twinge of unease, this gut feeling that something wasn't right. They asked for my license and registration, like any normal stop. But as they approached, I noticed something off about their demeanor, this tension in the air that made me uneasy. They seemed too serious, too intense for a routine stop. I handed over my documents, trying to stay calm, but they started asking these strange questions, things that didn't relate to the stop. It felt invasive, like they were probing into my personal life. I asked to see their badges, feeling this growing sense of concern. They hesitated, avoided showing any identification. That's when I knew something was wrong. I tried to stay composed, to ask why they were stopping me, but they got defensive, saying they needed to search my car. It didn't make sense, no legitimate reason, just this eerie demand. I refused, feeling this sense of danger rising within me. They got agitated, demanding I step out of the car. I felt this surge of fear, this realization that they might not be real cops. I tried to reason with them, to call 911 for verification, but they grabbed my phone, saying they'd handle everything. Panic surged through me. I felt trapped. They were forceful, menacing even. They searched my car without permission, not caring about my protests. I felt violated, this fear of the unknown clawing at me. I wanted to flee, but they blocked my path, saying I had to comply. I felt this overwhelming sense of peril, like I was at their mercy. They made threats, saying they knew things about me, things that chilled me to the bone. I tried to keep calm, but terror consumed me. I saw a chance and bolted, running for help, not caring where I'd go. I heard them yelling after me, their voices filled with menace. I didn't stop until I found a crowded street, hoping for safety in numbers. I flagged down a passing patrol car, telling them what had happened. The real cops took action, but those imposters were gone. I was left trembling, feeling violated and terrified. I couldn't shake off the memory of that chilling encounter, this disturbing interaction with people who weren't who they claimed to be. I was on this long drive, feeling exhausted and needing a break. I saw this old rest stop, looked abandoned, but I figured I could use a rest. As I pulled in, something felt off, but I brushed it aside. I parked my car and stepped out, feeling this eerie silence. There were a few rundown buildings and a deserted feeling that sent shivers down my spine. I started walking around, trying to find a restroom, but everything was locked up. I felt this unease, like I wasn't alone. I tried to shake it off, blaming it on my tiredness. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, and there they were, a group of people, looking rough and staring at me. They seemed off, this unsettling vibe that made my heart race. I smiled politely, trying not to show my fear. I asked if they knew where the restroom was, trying to act normal. But they just stared, not saying a word, which sent this chill down my spine. I felt this gut feeling that something wasn't right. I tried to leave, to get back to my car, but they surrounded me, blocking my way. I started feeling this sense of dread, this realization that I might be in trouble. They started talking among themselves in hushed tones, casting glances at me. I wanted to run, to scream for help, but I was frozen, this fear gripping me tight. I tried to reason with them, to ask if I disturbed them, but they didn't respond. They just looked at me, this cold, unsettling look that made me feel small and vulnerable. One of them stepped forward, this menacing look in his eyes. He asked what I was doing there, his tone aggressive. I felt this surge of panic, this fear of what they might do. I stammered, trying to explain that I was just looking for a restroom, that I meant no harm. But they didn't seem to believe me, this hostility growing palpable. I felt this overwhelming sense of peril, this fear of being outnumbered and trapped. I looked around, hoping for someone else to show up, for any sign of help, but there was no one. They started getting closer, this menacing intent in their movements. I tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. I felt this primal instinct to flee, to escape this nightmare. They said things that made my blood run cold, these threatening words that filled me with terror. I knew I had to get out of there, but they were blocking my way, closing in. I made a dash for it, running towards my car, hoping to escape. But they chased after me, their voices filled with malice. I felt this sheer terror, this fight or flight instinct kicking in. I reached my car, fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking. I managed to unlock the door and jumped inside, locking it just in time. They surrounded my car, banging on the windows, yelling threats. I felt this suffocating fear, this helplessness, not knowing if I'd make it out alive. I started my car and peeled out of there, not looking back. Tears streamed down my face, my heart pounding in my chest. It was a nightmarish ordeal I never thought I'd experience, this chilling encounter that left me shaken to my core. There was me driving along minding my own business, just wanting to get home when I saw something up ahead, something blocking the road. I slowed down, thinking it might be an accident or construction. As I got closer, I saw it wasn't official, just some debris and barrels blocking the way. There were a few people around, looking rough and giving off this uneasy vibe. I thought about turning around, but they signaled for me to stop. I felt this knot in my stomach, this instinct that something wasn't right. But I stopped anyway, hoping it was just a misunderstanding. They approached my car, these menacing looks on their faces. They said something about a detour and directed me to follow them. I didn't know what else to do, so I complied, hoping it would be a quick detour. But as I followed them, the road grew more desolate, more isolated. I started feeling this sense of dread, this fear that I was heading into trouble. I wanted to turn back, to escape this situation, but they were leading me deeper into the unknown. I felt this overwhelming sense of unease, like I was being led into a trap. They led me to this rundown building, this dilapidated place that sent shivers down my spine. I wanted to leave, to get out of there, but they surrounded my car, blocking my escape. I tried to reason with them, to ask what was going on, but they didn't listen. They just stood there, these ominous looks in their eyes. They said things that made no sense, these cryptic warnings that chilled me to the bone. I felt this surge of fear, this realization that I was in danger. I wanted to call for help, but they took my phone, saying they'd handle everything. I felt this sinking feeling, this helplessness. They started making threats, saying I had to stay, that I couldn't leave. I tried to remain calm, but panic was taking over. I made a dash for it, trying to break through their barricade. But they caught me, this struggle breaking out, a fight for my freedom. I managed to break free, running into the darkness, not knowing where I was going. I heard them chasing after me, their voices filled with malice. I stumbled upon this abandoned building, seeking refuge. I locked myself inside, heart pounding, hoping for safety. But they were outside, banging on the doors, yelling threats. I felt this overwhelming sense of terror, this fear of what they might do if they got inside. I hid, trying to stay silent, hoping they'd leave. But they were relentless, this nightmarish ordeal showing no signs of ending. I waited for what felt like an eternity, hearing their footsteps, their voices getting louder. I felt this sheer terror, this fight for survival. I thought about making a run for it, but they were waiting, lurking outside. I felt trapped, this night turning into a nightmare. Hours passed, and they finally left, but the fear lingered. I stayed hidden, not daring to move, not knowing if they'd come back. When I finally stepped out, the roadblock was gone, and I sped away, heart pounding in my chest. It was a night of sheer terror, this haunting encounter that left me shaken to my core. I was driving down this remote road, not a soul in sight. Then, I saw this couple by the side of the road, waving for help. They looked stranded, so I pulled over, thinking I could lend a hand. They seemed grateful, saying their car broke down and asked for a lift to the nearest town. Seemed harmless enough, so I let them in. They appeared friendly, normal even. But as we drove, things started feeling off. They seemed too nervous, too jittery for a couple in need of help. I tried to ignore it. Maybe they were just stressed about their car. Then, they started asking odd questions, things that didn't make sense. I tried to be polite, but it made me uneasy. They seemed too curious, too intrusive about my life. They mentioned taking a different route, saying it would be faster. I felt this knot in my stomach, a sense that something wasn't right. But I didn't want to argue, hoping it was just a shortcut. I glanced at them, and they were exchanging these looks, like they had some secret. It sent chills down my spine, this eerie feeling that things were about to go wrong. I tried to focus on driving, to stay calm, but this unease lingered. I wanted to turn back, to drop them off, but they insisted on this strange route. As we drove further, the road grew more desolate, more isolated. I started feeling this creeping fear, this sense of danger lurking in the air. I asked about the town, but they were evasive, vague about where they needed to go. I felt this overwhelming sense of alarm, this realization that something wasn't right. They suddenly got aggressive, demanding I pull over. I felt this surge of panic, this fear of what they might do. But they were forceful, menacing, and I didn't know what to do. I managed to pull over, and they told me to get out of the car. I refused, sensing danger. But they were insistent, threatening. I tried to reason with them, to plead for my safety, but they wouldn't listen. They were overpowering, this sense of peril growing more intense by the second. I made a dash for it, running as fast as I could, not looking back, just desperate to escape. I heard them yelling, chasing after me. I found this small convenience store, banging on the door, begging for help. I didn't know if they were still behind me, but I was terrified. The store clerk let me in, and I called the police. I felt this overwhelming relief, but I was shaking, terrified of what might have happened if I hadn't escaped. The police arrived, but the couple was gone. I felt this sense of dread, this fear that they might come back for me. It was a night of sheer terror, this encounter with the seemingly stranded couple that turned out to be a threat. I was left shaken, haunted by the memory of that chilling experience, this harrowing ordeal that shattered my trust in strangers. Back in 2017, I was driving home late at night, and I thought I'd take this less traveled road, thinking it might be a shortcut. But as I drove deeper, it started feeling eerie, this sense of isolation and darkness around. Then, I reached this junction, and there was a group of people standing there. I thought they might need help or directions, so I slowed down. But as I got closer, they didn't look right. Their faces were hidden in shadows, and they were just staring at me. I felt this knot in my stomach, this instinct that something was off. I tried to drive past, but they surrounded my car, blocking my way. I felt this rising fear, this sense of being trapped. They signaled for me to stop, to roll down my window. I didn't want to, this fear consuming me, but I did it anyway. They started saying strange things, asking cryptic questions that made no sense. I felt this overwhelming sense of dread, this fear of the unknown. I tried to drive away, to escape this strange encounter, but they wouldn't let me. They started banging on my car, yelling things I couldn't understand. I felt this surge of panic, this terror of what they might do. I tried to call for help, but my phone had no signal. I was completely cut off, alone with these menacing figures. I tried to reason with them, to ask what they wanted, but they just kept yelling and gesturing wildly. I felt this overwhelming sense of danger, like I was in the middle of something sinister. Then, they stepped back, allowing me to drive through. I felt this relief, this hope that I could get away from them. But as I drove, I noticed they were following me, this ominous presence behind. I tried to shake them off, to take different turns, but they kept following. I felt this overwhelming fear, this terror of being pursued by these unknown individuals. I didn't know who they were or what they wanted, but I knew it was nothing good. I saw a gas station up ahead and pulled in, hoping for safety. But they stopped too, parking not far from me. I felt this sinking feeling, this realization that I was still not safe. I stayed in my car, watching them from a distance. They didn't move, just standing there, staring. I felt this suffocating fear, this sense of being at their mercy. I thought about calling the police, but I didn't know what to tell them. These people hadn't really done anything, just this menacing presence that made my skin crawl. I saw my chance and sped out of there, driving as fast as I could. I didn't look back, just desperate to escape this nightmare. I reached home, but I didn't feel safe. I kept looking out the window, expecting them to show up at any moment. It was a night of sheer terror, this encounter with the group at the junction that set off a terrifying chain of events. I was left shaken, haunted by the memory of that chilling experience, this harrowing ordeal that made me fear the unknown. I was driving for a rideshare service, just like any other night. I picked up this passenger, a guy who seemed normal at first. But as we drove, things started feeling off. He was fidgety, kept glancing around nervously. I tried to make conversation, to ease the tension, but he was distant, unresponsive. I felt this sense of unease creeping in, this feeling that something wasn't right. Then, he started muttering to himself, these incomprehensible whispers that sent shivers down my spine. I tried to ignore it, maybe he was just stressed or tired. But then, he suddenly got aggressive, yelling at me for no reason. I felt this surge of fear, this realization that he might be dangerous. I tried to pull over to get him out of my car, but he refused. He kept yelling, this menacing look in his eyes. I felt this overwhelming sense of danger, this fear that I couldn't shake off. I tried to reason with him, to calm him down, but he just grew more erratic, more hostile. I felt this sheer terror, this dread of what he might do next. He started making threats, saying he knew things about me. I felt this chill run down my spine, this fear of the unknown. I wanted to call for help, but I was afraid of what he might do if I reached for my phone. I felt trapped, this night turning into a nightmare. I tried to stay calm, to drive to a populated area, hoping for help. But he kept getting more aggressive, more volatile. He reached into his bag, and I saw something glinting. I didn't know if it was a weapon, but I felt this overwhelming fear, this fight or flight instinct kicking in. I made a sudden turn, hoping to shake him off. But he grabbed the steering wheel, trying to control the car. I felt this sheer panic, this terror of losing control. I tried to push him away, to defend myself, but he was overpowering. I felt this suffocating fear, this fight for survival. I managed to pull over, screaming for help, hoping someone would hear me. But he wouldn't let me out, trapping me in this terrifying situation. I saw my chance and bolted out of the car, running for my life. I heard him yelling behind me, his footsteps echoing in the darkness. I found a nearby house, banging on the door, praying for someone to answer. I felt this overwhelming relief when someone finally did. The police arrived, but the guy was gone. I felt this sense of dread, this fear that he might come back for me. It was a night of sheer terror, this harrowing experience with the erratic and malevolent passenger. I was driving home late at night, and this car came up behind me, tailgating aggressively. I tried to ignore it, thinking they might just be in a rush. But they kept getting closer, flashing their lights, honking incessantly. I felt this surge of fear, this unsettling feeling that something wasn't right. I tried to speed up, to get away from them, but they matched my speed, staying right on my tail. I felt this growing sense of panic, this fear of what they might do. I tried to change lanes, to lose them, but they stayed right behind me, this relentless pursuit that sent shivers down my spine. I started driving faster, hoping to outrun them, but they kept up, this menacing chase that felt never-ending. I tried to call the police, but my hands were shaking so much I could barely dial. I felt this suffocating fear, this sense of being hunted. They started swerving, trying to force me off the road. I felt this overwhelming terror, this fight for my safety. I tried taking different turns, hoping to lose them, but they kept following, this menacing presence right behind me. I saw a gas station up ahead and pulled in, hoping for safety in numbers. But they stopped too, parking not far from me. I felt this sinking feeling, this realization that I was still not safe. I stayed in my car, watching them from a distance. They didn't move, just sitting there, watching. I felt this overwhelming dread, this fear that they might come after me. I thought about making a run for it, but I was paralyzed by fear. I didn't know what to do, this night turning into a nightmare. I saw my chance and sped out of there, driving as fast as I could. I didn't look back, just desperate to escape this ordeal. I reached home, but I couldn't shake off the fear. I kept looking out the window, expecting them to show up at any moment. It was a night of sheer terror, this menacing chase that left me shaken to my core. I was driving down this deserted highway, late at night. There wasn't much around, just darkness and the hum of my engine. That's when I saw this figure by the side of the road, thumb out, asking for a ride. I debated stopping, but something about the way they looked made me pull over. As they approached, I saw it was a woman, disheveled and distressed. She looked helpless, her eyes pleading for help. I felt this tug at my heartstrings, this urge to assist someone in need. I asked if she needed a lift, and she nodded gratefully, getting into the passenger seat. She seemed quiet, withdrawn. I tried to make conversation, but she was distant, lost in her thoughts. I felt this unease, this lingering sense that something wasn't right. But I brushed it off. Maybe she was just shaken from being stranded. As we drove, she remained silent, and I noticed she kept glancing at the rearview mirror, almost nervously. I tried to make small talk to ease the tension, but she seemed preoccupied, on edge. Then, she asked to make a stop at this secluded spot. I hesitated, but she insisted, saying she needed to pick something up. I felt this sinking feeling, this fear of the unknown. I pulled over, and she got out, disappearing into the darkness. I waited, feeling this growing sense of dread. Minutes passed, but she didn't return. I felt this instinct to leave, to get away from there. But before I could drive off, I heard this chilling noise, something scratching against the car's surface. I froze, this terror gripping me tight. I tried to see what it was, but it was too dark. I felt this suffocating fear, this fear of the unknown. Then, she reappeared, but she was different. Her demeanor had changed, this unsettling look in her eyes. I wanted to drive away, to escape this situation, but she was already back in the car. I tried to start the engine, but it wouldn't turn over. I felt this surge of panic, this realization that I was trapped with this stranger. She started acting strangely, muttering incomprehensible words. I felt this overwhelming fear, this sense that something was terribly wrong. I reached for my phone, but she snatched it away, saying I couldn't call for help. I felt this chilling realization, this fear of being at her mercy. She started saying things that made no sense, this ominous talk that sent shivers down my spine. I felt this sheer terror, this fear of what she might do next. I pleaded with her, tried to reason, but she was erratic, unpredictable. I felt this overwhelming helplessness, this fear of the unknown. I managed to unlock the door, trying to make a run for it. But she grabbed my arm, the struggle breaking out, a fight for my freedom. I managed to break free, running as fast as I could, not looking back, just desperate to escape. I heard her yelling behind me, this haunting voice that filled me with terror. I found this house, banging on the door, hoping for safety. I felt this overwhelming relief when someone finally opened it. The police arrived, but she was gone. I felt this lingering fear, this fear that she might come back for me. It was a night of sheer terror, this encounter with the stranded hitchhiker that hid a chilling secret. I was left shaken, haunted by the memory of that chilling experience, this harrowing ordeal that shattered my trust in strangers. I was driving home after a long day, the roads quiet and the night creeping in. As I approached this low-lit street, I noticed a group of people, a couple, and a guy who seemed distressed. It was odd, something about their interaction felt off, tense. Then, I saw the guy being forcefully shoved into a car. I felt this jolt of fear, this sinking feeling that something sinister was happening right before my eyes. It looked like an abduction, but my mind struggled to accept it, hoping it was just a misunderstanding. I thought about calling the police, but this wave of fear washed over me, this dread of getting involved. I didn't want trouble, I just wanted to get home safely. But then, one of them noticed me watching. Their eyes locked with mine, this chilling stare that sent shivers down my spine. I felt this overwhelming fear, this realization that I might be in danger too. I tried to drive away, to escape this scene, but they started following me, this menacing pursuit that made my heart race. I felt this urge to call for help, but my hands were trembling so much I could barely hold the phone. I felt this suffocating fear, this sense of being hunted. I tried to lose them, taking different turns, but they kept tailing me, this relentless chase that felt never-ending. I spotted a police station up ahead and rushed there, hoping for safety. But as I parked, I saw their car pulling in too. I felt this overwhelming dread, this fear that I was still not safe. I stayed in my car, watching them from a distance. They didn't move, just sitting there, watching. I felt this chilling fear, this realization that they were determined to keep me quiet. I wanted to scream for help, but fear had silenced me. I felt this sheer terror, this fight for my safety. I saw my chance and bolted out of the car, running as fast as I could, not looking back, just desperate to escape this nightmare. I found a nearby house, banging on the door, praying for someone to answer. I felt this overwhelming relief when someone finally did. The police arrived, but the people were gone. I felt this lingering fear, this fear that they might come back for me. I was driving back from work, the streets relatively quiet. It was getting late, and I was eager to get home. That's when I stopped at this traffic light, and suddenly, this guy approached my car. He looked suspicious, and before I knew it, he was banging on my window, demanding I get out. I felt this surge of fear, this panic as I realized what was happening. It was an attempted carjacking. I didn't hesitate. I hit the gas pedal, trying to get away. But he was fast, chasing my car. I felt this overwhelming terror, this fear for my life. I made a sudden turn, hoping to lose him. But he kept following, this relentless pursuit that felt never-ending. I wanted to call for help, but my phone had fallen to the floor, out of reach. I felt this suffocating fear, this sense of being alone in this fight for survival. I tried to take different streets, to shake him off, but he kept tailing me, this menacing presence right behind me. I spotted a police station in the distance and raced there, hoping for safety. But as I pulled in, I saw him still following. I felt this overwhelming dread, this fear that he was determined to get to me. I stayed in my car, watching him from a distance. He didn't move, just standing there, watching. I felt this chilling fear, this realization that the danger was far from over. I wanted to scream for help, but fear had paralyzed me. I felt this sheer terror, this fight for my safety. I saw my chance and bolted out of the car, running as fast as I could, not looking back, just desperate to escape this nightmare. I found this small shop, banging on the door, praying for someone to answer. I felt this overwhelming relief when someone finally did. The police arrived, but the guy was gone. I felt this lingering fear, this fear that he might come back for me. I was driving home after a long day at work, just wanting to get back and unwind. The roads were quiet, and the night was peaceful. But as I turned onto this deserted street, I saw a group of cars lined up, blocking the road. I thought maybe it was some event or accident, so I cautiously drove ahead. But then I realized it wasn't an accident or an event. It was this menacing car club, these guys with their revving engines and this intimidating aura. I felt this knot in my stomach, this sense of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I tried to turn around, to get away, but they surrounded my car, blocking every possible exit. I felt this surge of fear, this realization that I might be in trouble. One of them, this guy with tattoos and a mean look, approached my car, tapping on my window. I rolled it down, trying to stay calm, but I was shaking inside. He started asking questions, demanding to know why I was there. I tried to explain that I was just trying to get home, but he wasn't buying it. I felt this overwhelming sense of intimidation, this fear of what they might do. They started making threats, this menacing talk that sent chills down my spine. I felt this overwhelming sense of danger, this fear that I was at their mercy. I tried to reason with them, to apologize and leave, but they weren't having it. They kept blocking my car, this threatening presence that made my heart race. I wanted to call for help, but I was afraid they might escalate things if I reached for my phone. I felt this suffocating fear, this sense of being trapped. They started circling my car, revving their engines, this menacing display of power. I felt this sheer terror, this fear that they might do something to my car or worse, to me. I tried to stay composed, to remain calm, but inside, I was panicking. I felt this overwhelming fear, this dread of what might happen next. I saw my chance and hit the gas pedal, trying to push through their blockade. But they chased after me, this terrifying pursuit that felt never-ending. I tried to lose them, taking different turns, but they kept following, this menacing presence right behind me. I spotted a gas station and pulled in, hoping for safety in numbers. But they parked too, not far from me. I felt this sinking feeling, this realization that I was still not safe. I stayed in my car, watching them from a distance. They didn't move, just sitting there, watching. I felt this chilling fear, this fear that they were not done with me yet. I wanted to make a run for it, to find help, but fear had rooted me to my seat. I felt this overwhelming terror, this fight for survival. I waited until they finally left, this sense of relief washing over me. But the fear lingered, this haunting memory of that menacing encounter. It was a night of sheer terror, this run-in with the menacing car club that triggered a night of threats and intimidation. I was on my last delivery of the night, a pizza to a trailer park on the outskirts of town. It was late, and the night had this eerie feel to it. As I drove into the trailer park, I felt this sense of isolation, this feeling of being far from everything familiar. The trailers were spaced out, and there weren't many lights around. I pulled up to the address, this eerie quiet surrounding me. I grabbed the pizza and walked up to the trailer, feeling this chill down my spine. As I knocked on the door, I heard shuffling inside. The door creaked open slowly, and this guy appeared, this unsettling figure in the dimly lit doorway. He had this wild look in his eyes, this unkempt appearance that sent a shiver down my spine. I tried to be polite, giving him the pizza, but he just stared, this eerie silence filling the air. He mumbled something incomprehensible, this unsettling mumble that made me uneasy. I felt this overwhelming urge to leave, this sense of danger lurking around me. I tried to back away, but he stepped closer, this menacing presence right in front of me. I felt this suffocating fear, this realization that I might be in danger. He grabbed my arm, this tight grip that made my heart race. I tried to break free, to get away from him, but he was too strong. He started talking, this nonsensical talk that sent chills down my spine. I felt this overwhelming fear, this dread of what he might do next. I managed to pull away, running back to my car, not looking back, just desperate to escape this nightmare. I felt this chilling sensation, this fear that he might come after me. I drove out of there as fast as I could, the trailer park fading into the distance. But the fear lingered, this haunting memory of that chilling encounter. I was driving home from a friend's place. The roads were empty, and the night was eerie. It was a familiar route, one I'd taken countless times, but that night felt different. As I glanced in my rearview mirror, I noticed this car, a few vehicles behind me, sticking out like a sore thumb. At first, I brushed it off as coincidence, but it kept following every turn I made. I felt this growing unease, this creeping sensation that I was being watched. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just my imagination, but I couldn't ignore the persistent feeling of being followed. I took a different route, trying to lose them, but they stayed behind, maintaining a constant distance. I felt this knot in my stomach, this fear that began to settle in. I stopped at a gas station, hoping they'd pass by, but they parked nearby. I felt this surge of panic, this realization that I was being watched, stalked even. I tried to see who was in the car, but the windows were tinted. I felt this overwhelming sense of vulnerability, this fear of the unknown. I wanted to call the police, but my hands were shaking so much I could barely dial. I felt this suffocating fear, this sense of being utterly alone in this situation. I made a run for it, driving as fast as I could, taking random turns. But they kept up, this relentless pursuit that sent shivers down my spine. I reached my neighborhood, hoping the familiarity would bring safety. But as I pulled in, they followed, this haunting presence right behind me. I parked at my house, but I couldn't bring myself to get out. I felt this overwhelming dread, this fear that they might come after me. I stayed in my car, watching them from a distance. They didn't move, just sitting there, watching. I felt this chilling fear, this realization that I wasn't safe even at home. I wanted to scream for help, to call someone, but fear had paralyzed me. I felt this sheer terror, this fight for my safety. I saw my chance and bolted out of the car, running inside, locking every door. I felt this overwhelming relief to be behind closed doors, but the fear lingered. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, the car was gone. It was getting late, and fatigue was creeping in as I navigated through the dimly lit streets. Then, I saw this figure at the side of the road, a hitchhiker with their thumb out. I felt this pang of sympathy, this desire to help someone in need. So, I pulled over, thinking I could offer a ride and some assistance. The hitchhiker seemed harmless enough, this weary-looking person with a backpack. I thought maybe they were just down on their luck, needing a lift to the next town. I felt this urge to help, this sense of doing a good deed. They got in, thanking me for stopping. We exchanged a few pleasantries, but as the ride went on, I noticed something was off. There was this uneasiness in their demeanor, this shifting glance that made me uneasy. I tried to engage in small talk, to ease the tension, but they seemed distant, almost evasive. I felt this growing sense of discomfort, this realization that I might have made a mistake. They asked if I could drop them off at a remote location, far from the main road. I hesitated, but I didn't want to leave them stranded. I felt this tug of war inside, this conflict between wanting to help and this feeling that something wasn't right. As we got closer to the spot they mentioned, this sense of dread washed over me. It was this desolate area, no signs of life around. I felt this overwhelming fear, this realization that I might be in danger. They asked me to pull over, and as I did, they suddenly turned towards me, this menacing look in their eyes. I felt this rush of panic, this fear gripping me. They demanded my belongings, this threatening tone that sent chills down my spine. I tried to reason with them, to talk them out of it, but they were insistent. I tried to hit the gas pedal and escape, but they grabbed onto me, this tight grip that paralyzed me with fear. I felt this suffocating terror, this sense of being completely helpless. They took my belongings and got out, disappearing into the darkness. I sat there, trembling, trying to process what had just happened. I felt this overwhelming shock, this fear of what they might do next. I managed to drive away, this haunting encounter etched in my mind. But the fear lingered, this haunting memory of that chilling experience. I was driving back home after a regular day, feeling tired and looking forward to crashing on the couch. Then, I got a call. It was a strange number, and I hesitated, but something told me to pick up. A voice on the other end, cold and menacing, said they had someone I cared about and that if I wanted to see them again, I had to do what they said. They had my wife. My heart dropped, and I felt this surge of fear. They gave me instructions, saying I had to complete tasks by midnight or else. I didn't know what else meant, but I didn't want to find out. They wanted me to drive to different places, leave things, pick things up. Each task was more nerve-wracking than the last. I had to follow their orders, and I couldn't call the cops or tell anyone. They made it clear that if I did, it would be the end for my wife. So, I did what they said, my mind racing with questions, fear, and anger. I was shaking, my hands gripping the steering wheel tight, as I drove from place to place. Every time, my heart pounded harder, wondering what they'd make me do next, wondering if my loved one was okay. It felt like hours passed, but it was only minutes. The tasks became more twisted, more dangerous. They wanted me to go to isolated places, to do things I couldn't fathom. But I had no choice. I was doing it for my wife's survival. I didn't know who was behind it, why they targeted us. I just knew I had to get through this night, had to do whatever it took to save my loved one. Every task felt like a step into the unknown, a test of my limits, and I was terrified. The clock was ticking, and with every task completed, my nerves frayed more. The fear, the desperation, it was all overwhelming. I wanted it to end, but I was trapped in this nightmare, following their orders like a puppet on strings. The places they sent me were deserted, eerie. I felt like I was being watched, like someone was always around, hiding in the shadows. I couldn't shake off the feeling of dread, of being at their mercy. I was exhausted, mentally and physically drained, but I had to keep going. I had to push through, no matter how terrifying it got. The fear for my wife kept me going, kept me doing what they asked. Midnight approached, and I completed the final task. I held my breath, waiting for some sign, some indication that my wife would be safe. The silence was deafening, the tension unbearable. Then, I got a call. The voice said they were releasing my wife. Relief washed over me, but the fear lingered, the memory of that night etched in my mind like a nightmare that wouldn't fade. I didn't know who was behind it or if they'd come back. I rushed to see my wife, holding her close, grateful she was safe. But that night haunted me, the feeling of helplessness, the terror of what might have happened. It was a night I'd never forget, a night that changed everything. I was driving along. It was late. I wanted to get home. I turned onto this deserted stretch when I noticed something hot up ahead. There was this commotion on the road, cars parked haphazardly, people moving around in a frenzy. I felt this knot in my stomach, this sense that something was seriously wrong. I slowed down, trying to make sense of the chaos. There were these guys, blocking the road, shouting at each other. I felt this surge of anxiety, this overwhelming sense of danger lurking around. As I got closer, they noticed my car, and suddenly, their attention shifted towards me. I felt this overwhelming fear, this realization that I might be in trouble. They approached my car, this menacing group with harsh glares. I tried to drive past them, to get away, but they surrounded my car, blocking every possible exit. I felt this suffocating fear, this sense of being trapped. One of them, this guy with a menacing look, banged on my window, demanding I get out. I felt this overwhelming sense of danger, this fear that things could turn ugly. I tried to reason with them, to explain that I just wanted to go home. But they were aggressive, shouting threats, demanding I obey their commands. I felt this chilling fear, this sense of being at their mercy. I tried to call for help, but my phone had no signal. I felt this overwhelming panic, this desperate need to escape. They started banging on my car, this terrifying cacophony that made my heart race. I felt this sheer terror, this fight or flight response kicking in. I hit the gas pedal, trying to push through their blockade, but they chased after me, this menacing pursuit that felt never-ending. I felt this overwhelming sense of dread, this fear that I might not make it out. I took a turn, hoping to lose them, but they kept following, this relentless pursuit right behind me. I felt this suffocating fear, this sense of being hunted. I spotted a gas station and pulled in, hoping for safety in numbers. But they parked nearby, not far from me. I felt this sinking feeling, this realization that I was still not safe. I stayed in my car, watching them from a distance. They didn't move, just sitting there, watching. I felt this chilling fear, this fear that they were not done with me yet. I wanted to make a run for it, to find help, but fear had rooted me to my seat. I felt this overwhelming terror, this fight for survival. I saw my chance and bolted out of the car, running as fast as I could, not looking back, just desperate to escape this nightmare. I felt this chilling sensation, this fear that they might come after me. I found a nearby house and knocked on the door, begging for help. I felt this overwhelming relief when someone finally answered. I told them what happened, trembling with fear. The police arrived, but the group was gone. I was on my regular night shift, driving the bus through the empty streets. It was way past midnight, and there were no passengers, just the dark road ahead of me. As I drove along the deserted route, I noticed something strange up ahead. It was this figure, standing at the bus stop with their hand out as if waiting for the bus. I slowed down, wondering who would be out here at this hour. They looked odd, this shadowy figure in the dimly lit street. I felt this growing unease, this sense that something wasn't right. As I stopped to pick them up, they got on the bus, but something about them felt off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but there was this eerie vibe surrounding them. I felt this chilling sensation, this gut feeling that something was wrong. They sat in the back, this figure cloaked in darkness, almost hidden. I tried to shake off the discomfort, focusing on driving. But the atmosphere felt tense, this eerie silence filling the bus. I glanced at the rearview mirror, trying to catch a glimpse of them, but they were shrouded in darkness. I felt this sense of dread, this fear that I might be in danger. I could feel their eyes on me, this intense gaze that made my skin crawl. I tried to keep my focus on the road, but their presence felt suffocating, this overwhelming feeling of being watched. They suddenly spoke, this chilling voice that sent shivers down my spine. I felt this overwhelming fear, this dread of what they might do next. They started talking about strange things, this cryptic talk that made no sense. I felt this rising panic, this realization that I might be dealing with someone dangerous. I tried to engage in conversation, to keep things calm, but they seemed unhinged, their words filled with this eerie sense of foreboding. I felt this sense of urgency, this desperate need to get them off the bus. I pulled over, telling them it was their stop, but they didn't move. Instead, they stared at me, this intense gaze that made my heart race. I felt this suffocating fear, this sense of being trapped. I asked them to leave again, but they just laughed, this unsettling laughter that echoed through the bus. I felt this overwhelming terror, this fear that things were spiraling out of control. I pressed the emergency button, hoping for help, but there was no response. I felt this sinking feeling, this realization that I was on my own. I tried to remain calm, to think of a way out, but fear had clouded my thoughts. I felt this chilling sense of doom, this dread of what might happen next. They got up and started walking toward me, this slow, deliberate approach. I felt this overwhelming panic, this desperate need to escape. I tried to hit the gas and drive away, but they lunged at me, grabbing onto me with a strength that paralyzed me with fear. I felt this suffocating terror, this sense of being utterly helpless. I fought back, struggling to break free, but they were overpowering. I felt this sheer terror, this fight for my life. Suddenly, they let go and got off the bus, disappearing into the darkness. I sat there, trembling, trying to process what had just happened. I felt this overwhelming shock, this fear of what they might do next. I was driving to work for my late night shift, the road silent, the darkness engulfing everything around me. The clock showed an ungodly hour, and my eyelids were heavy with fatigue. I remember thinking about how I needed this job, how it was essential to make ends meet, especially during these tough times. As I drove, I noticed this figure on the side of the road, this shadowy silhouette that seemed to appear out of nowhere. It was unsettling, this lone figure standing there in the dead of night. I felt this uneasiness creeping in, this sense of something being off. I slowed down, trying to make out who it was. As I got closer, I saw this person, standing still, staring at my car. There was something about them, this eerie stillness that sent a shiver down my spine. I felt this growing sense of dread, this fear gnawing at me. I tried to brush it off, attributing it to my tired mind playing tricks. But as I drove past them, I noticed they turned their head, this slow, deliberate movement that made my heart skip a beat. I felt this overwhelming fear, this dread of what might happen next. I looked in the rearview mirror, and they were still there, watching me, this intense gaze that made me uncomfortable. I felt this chilling sensation, this fear that they might follow me. I tried to shake off the unease, to focus on the road ahead, but their image lingered in my mind, this haunting presence that refused to leave. I felt this overwhelming urge to get to work, to be in a place of safety. But then, as I approached a stoplight, I saw them again, standing on the sidewalk, staring at me. I felt this suffocating fear, this sense of being watched. The traffic light turned red, forcing me to stop. I saw them walking towards my car, this slow, deliberate pace that sent shivers down my spine. I felt this overwhelming panic, this desperate need to escape. I locked my doors, my heart racing as they reached my car. They tapped on my window, this eerie sound that made me freeze. I felt this sheer terror, this dread of what they might do. I tried to ignore them, to pretend I didn't see or hear them, hoping they would go away. But they persisted, tapping harder, this persistent rhythm that echoed in my head. I felt this overwhelming sense of helplessness, this fear that I might not make it out. They spoke, their voice low and eerie, asking for a ride. I shook my head, trying to signal that I couldn't help. But they didn't stop, their request turning more demanding. I felt this chilling fear, this sense of being in danger. The light turned green, and I hit the gas pedal, speeding away, not looking back, just desperate to escape this nightmare. I felt this chilling sensation, this fear that they might chase after me. I drove to work, my heart pounding, trying to calm my nerves. But the encounter haunted me, this chilling experience that refused to fade. I felt this overwhelming dread, this fear that they might find me again. I was driving late at night, the road stretching out in front of me, illuminated by my headlights. I'd been on the road for hours, feeling the weariness sink into my bones. I needed a break, a coffee maybe, just something to keep me going. That's when I saw the faint glow of a diner sign ahead. As I pulled into the parking lot, the place looked deserted, save for a few flickering lights inside. I thought it was odd for a diner to be so empty at this hour, but I shrugged it off, thinking maybe it was just a slow night. I stepped inside, the bell above the door jingling softly. There were a few customers scattered around, all looking rather grim. I felt this unease settle in, this strange atmosphere that made my skin crawl. I took a seat at the counter, trying to shake off the feeling. The waitress came over, her smile forced, her eyes darting around nervously. I ordered a coffee, trying to strike up a conversation, but she seemed hesitant, avoiding eye contact. That's when I noticed them, this group of men sitting in the corner booth, their eyes fixed on me. There was something about them, this menacing aura that made me uneasy. I felt this overwhelming sense of being unwelcome. I tried to ignore their stares, sipping my coffee and focusing on the road ahead. But their presence was unsettling, this constant feeling of being watched. The waitress hurried over, whispering something about leaving. I asked her what was wrong, but she just shook her head, her eyes filled with fear. I felt this growing sense of dread, this fear of something going terribly wrong. As I got up to leave, the men in the corner booth stood up, blocking my path. I felt this overwhelming panic, this realization that I might be in trouble. They started asking questions, demanding to know why I was there, who I was. I tried to explain, to diffuse the tension, but they were aggressive, their voices growing louder. I felt this suffocating fear, this sense of being trapped. I tried to make a run for it, but they grabbed me, this strong grip that made my heart race. I felt this sheer terror, this fear of what they might do. They accused me of something I didn't understand, their words filled with threats. I tried to reason with them, to explain that they had the wrong person. But they didn't listen, their anger escalating. I saw a chance and broke free, running out of the diner, not looking back, just desperate to escape. I felt this overwhelming terror, this fear that they might come after me. Back last year I was driving to a buddy's a few miles out. The darkness outside made me feel isolated, just me and the endless stretch of road ahead. That's when it happened, out of nowhere, a loud thud against my windshield. I felt this jolt of fear, my heart racing, my hands gripping the steering wheel tight. I pulled over, my mind racing with questions. I stepped out of the car, the night air cold against my skin. I checked the windshield and there it was, a sizable rock lying on the road. I had this eerie feeling, this sense of being watched. I scanned the area but saw no one, just the empty, dark road stretching into the distance. As I bent down to inspect the damage, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around, and there they were, 3 men emerging from the shadows. I felt this sudden rush of fear, this sense of being outnumbered. They looked rough, these men with menacing glares, their presence sending shivers down my spine. I tried to remain composed, to defuse the tension, asking if they were okay or needed help. But they were aggressive, their demeanor hostile. I felt this overwhelming sense of danger, this knot in my stomach telling me something was terribly wrong. They accused me of something I hadn't done, their voices growing louder, more menacing. I tried to reason with them, to explain that they had the wrong person. But they wouldn't listen, their anger escalating. I felt this rising panic, this fear of what they might do next. I tried to make a run for it, to get back to my car, but they blocked my path. I felt this sheer terror, this helplessness of being trapped. They demanded something from me, something I didn't have. I tried to plead with them, to convince them that they were mistaken. But they were relentless, their threats growing more serious. I felt this overwhelming urge to escape, this desperate need to get away. I pushed past them, running back to my car, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt this suffocating fear, this dread of what might happen. I got into my car and sped away, not daring to look back, just desperate to escape the terrifying encounter. I felt this overwhelming relief, this fear slowly giving way to adrenaline. I drove for what felt like an eternity, the memory of that chilling encounter etched into my mind. I felt this lingering fear, this haunting memory that refused to fade. I was on the late-night patrol, the streets quiet and bathed in darkness. It was routine, driving through the city, keeping an eye out for anything out of the ordinary. The night air was still, and I had this feeling of eerie calmness as I went about my duty. That's when I saw him, this lone figure standing by the side of the road. It was strange, this guy just standing there in the dead of night. I slowed down, trying to make sense of the situation. He was dressed in worn-out clothes, his face hidden in the shadows. I felt this sense of alertness, this professional instinct kicking in. I pulled over, intending to check if he needed help. But something about him seemed off, this strange vibe that made me cautious. I stepped out of my car, my hand hovering near my holster. I approached him cautiously, calling out to ask if he was okay. He turned slowly, and in that moment, my heart skipped a beat. There was something about his eyes, this emptiness that sent a chill down my spine. He didn't say a word, just stared at me with this unsettling intensity. I felt this overwhelming sense of unease, this creeping feeling that something wasn't right. I asked if he needed any assistance, trying to maintain a calm tone. He remained silent, his gaze fixed on me. I felt this growing sense of discomfort, this unnerving feeling that I was in a dangerous situation. I asked him to step away from the road for safety reasons, but he didn't budge. I reached for my radio to call for backup, but before I could, he took a step towards me, this slow, deliberate movement that made my heart race. I felt this surge of adrenaline, this instinctual fear of imminent danger. I stepped back, my hand gripping my weapon, preparing for the worst. I asked him to stay still, but he kept advancing, his movements erratic. I felt this escalating fear, this dread of what might happen. He spoke, his voice low and chilling, saying something cryptic that made my blood run cold. I felt this overwhelming sense of being in danger, this urgency to protect myself. I called for backup, my voice shaky, trying to keep him engaged until help arrived. But he kept coming closer, this menacing look in his eyes. I felt this sheer terror, this fear of what he might do. I took a defensive stance, trying to keep him at bay. I felt this overwhelming panic, this desperate need for backup to arrive. But it felt like an eternity before I heard the sirens in the distance. He must have heard it too, because he suddenly turned and vanished into the darkness. I felt this overwhelming relief, this fear slowly ebbing away as my colleagues arrived. It was a night of sheer terror, this chilling encounter with that man that turned into a frightening ordeal. I was left shaken, haunted by the memory of that horrifying experience, this harrowing ordeal that made me fear for my safety.